This is our project on Aristotelian essentialism. In order to understand Aristotelian essentialism, we must first understand the essence of a human being, what makes us unique. We are rational beings, meaning that we use our given thought and seek to understand more while comprehending change. Also, we must know that nature is from which everything exists. But why do we exist? What do we as rational animals seek as our final cause? Why does Aristotle think there must be a final cause of rational action, and what is the final cause of rational action according to Aristotle? In Aristotle's Physics Book 2, 200a, he states, "The end is what something is for, and the starting point comes from the definition, i.e. from the account of the form." Aristotle is telling that all natural things lead to some end. Their actions are done for the sake of something. This something is the final cause. Aristotle's argument is that a material cause, what something is made of, leads to a formal cause, which is what said material is used to create. For example, wood is used to build a house. Once said object is created, then the efficient cause can begin. This stage is the changing process, the start of an advancement or growth. Now Aristotle's concept is that this movement must lead to an end, i.e. the final cause. For when there is some end toward which a continuous process of movement is directed, that last thing is also what the process is for, which Aristotle said in 194a. Therefore, rational being must undergo some form of change, for the human is a form of nature. Aristotle believed that the rational being's efficient cause revolved around ethics. A human works towards some form of contentment, and in order to get there, they must be considered virtuous. We are social animals, and we seek to get along with others while gaining knowledge throughout our lives. In order for one to fulfill the social animal's role and be good, the person must be honest, courageous, kind, and retain proper character. As a rational being works towards being virtuous, they are also working towards their final cause, eudaimonia.
What is eudaimonia? Eudaimonia is a Greek word with no direct translation. Today it's often translated as happiness, but that's not the spirit of eudaimonia. We often associate happiness with a subjective feeling or an emotion, but eudaimonia refers to one's overall general well-being as a whole, not simply a sensation. To put it another way, eudaimonia is concerned with the flourishing of a being. To illustrate that eudaimonia and happiness are not synonymous, there are a number of cases in which happiness can be achieved, but which are bad for a person's well-being. One such example is the use of narcotics such as heroin. Using these drugs can induce a feeling of euphoria, however it clearly wreaks havoc on your body. So what is eudaimonia in different creatures? While the natures of all animals, including human beings, share some similar traits, obviously each animal has its own essential aspects. Because of this, eudaimonia for each animal, which was defined as the final cause or fulfilling one's nature, cannot necessarily be the same. What is in the best interest of one creature could be harmful to others. In the words of Dr. Aaron Taylor, in order to understand a eudaimon life, you must understand the creature trying to live that life. Heraclitus, the pre-Socratic philosopher, makes a similar point. Although his beliefs about moral relativism were very different than Aristotle's beliefs of absolutism, both found that what was best for one creature is not best for others. Heraclitus gives numerous examples in his works, and a few include, "Pigs rejoice in mud more than pure water," and "The sea is purest and most polluted water, to fish drinkable and bringing safety, to humans undrinkable and destructive." Both of these beautifully illustrate Aristotle's ideas about how eudaimonia changes among different species.
What does essential mean according to Aristotle? Aristotle claims that a form's core properties are necessary to make it what it is, to form its definition. For the human, its core properties are one's character and habits, for the character is formed by the repetition of action. Essential exists from what an object is and is not, for all things begin from a certain starting point. For example, art comes from nature and attempts to encompass it. Art is not nature, but its properties induce it to be so. The materials used to make it, the form of which it is in, and its end purpose are all core properties that make the piece essential, for their final cause is to produce what is out in nature, therefore emphasizing that it comes from nature, but is not nature itself. Another example of this might be temperature. The sense of cold forms from the lack of heat, while a feeling of heat produces an absence of cold. Each sensation is determined by its cease to be the other. The definition of cold in terms of scarcity of heat gives its essence. Cold comes to be from something that is not cold, such as hot. The starting points of each temperature are contraries, just as the art was not nature, yet is made to resemble it. If a human has been deprived of the opportunity to develop fully, why are they still human? In order to fully explain whether a human has been deprived of the opportunity to develop fully, we must understand the term nous. Nous is what sets us apart as the creatures we are and enables us to explore scientific inquiry. However, if one is not capable of pursuing the scientific inquiry along with the path towards eudaimonia, do they still qualify as a human being? Aristotle uses the biological organism of a man-headed calf, meaning half human and half animal. Technically, the organism is not full human, but in Physics Book 2, 199b, Aristotle states, if they were unable to reach a certain limit and end, they would also have been brought into being by a defective starting point, just as in the actual state of things, freaks are brought into being by a defective seed. This means that the starting point for the human animals was a human seed from which all humans begin. The starting point was immortal, but the path to the end point is changed. However, the continuous movement of this half-animal, half-human still arrives at some end, and Aristotle tells us that it's the same end, hence his statement, but in every case it proceeds towards the same end and achieves it if nothing impedes. Another object in which this case applies would be a bed. If the bed is not yet completed, but has the potential of being a bed, then it is a bed. The material for said bed is still the starting point for its movement and development into its final cause. It does not yet have its nature or shape, but its form has been established. Though this object is not considered human, it follows the same concept of a human, growth through a certain starting point. Whether it be the human animal or the bed, it must be growing into something to be considered a form. One has a definition of its form, while the other advances its form, thus distinguishing the living from the inanimate. The human animal has the ability to continue growing and moving, therefore it is still possible for it to reach the same final cause as a human.
A human being, as described by Aristotle, is a rational animal. Therefore, it is necessary that one must be able to comprehend a form and be able to gain knowledge on the subject while adapting their thought. Or as Aristotle puts it, the function of the human being is activity of the soul in accord with reason, or not without reason. This means that our reasoning can be applied to something more, to our characteristics and habits. These habits lead to our virtues that in turn lay the path for a eudaimon life. Our experiences help us discover certain habits and characteristics, according to Aristotle. We learn what is right and what is wrong due to our ability to reason. We can comprehend excess and deficiency of each given human trait. We must know what is essential to a human being so that we can understand our ability to be rational, along with the concept that we retain the capacity to be virtuous. However, we must enact our character in order to form habits that we later perceive to be right or wrong during our lifelong exploration for temperance. Moving on, we'll now relate Aristotelian essentialism to contemporary development economics. Maria Nussbaum, in her publication Political Theory, creates a list of basic human functional capabilities. First, Nussbaum argues that each person should have the opportunity to live a complete life and not die prematurely. Second, each person should be able to have good health. Good health includes not only bodily health such as nourishment and access to shelter, but also the opportunity for sexual satisfaction and the ability to move from place to place freely. Third, people should be able to avoid unnecessary pain and be able to pursue pleasurable experiences. 4, people should be able to experience the world around them and to use their mind. 5, people should be able to form attachments to things and people other than themselves and to experience emotions about these things such as love and grief. 6, people should be able to reflect on their own life and be able to plan it for themselves. 7. Similar to number 5, people should be able to interact with other humans and form familial and social connections. 8. People should be able to relate to other species of animals and plants and to show concern for them. 9. People should have the opportunity for recreation, to be able to relax after a day of work. Children should be able to play and experience joy. And 10. People should be able to live their own unique life. Some animals, such as ants and termites, thrive on simply being a cog in a colony. However, humans need a sense of individuality. Nussbaum argues that government should strive to give citizens the opportunity to achieve each of these basic functions. Nussbaum's views are clearly essentialist. Her list proposes a definition of basic human function. She expands on Aristotle's ideas by laying out a more in-depth list of what constitutes a fulfilling life. In all 10 of these human functions of a person are fulfilled, then a person will have eudaimonia. In this way, it's also Aristotelian.
Why does the proper response to this list of capabilities require us to pay close attention to context, history, and culture? To defend this list of capabilities in terms of a society's context, I would like to quote Aristotle from 1094b. In each case, we should follow the method of inquiry suited to their nature and make very serious efforts to define them correctly, for they are of great and decisive importance regarding what follows. Here, Aristotle points out that each case must be assessed in order to understand the means of achieving the end result of happiness. Each aspect of the individual must be reviewed. Nussbaum would qualify this approach as a sense of compassion and respect, for it ensures to evaluate the features of importance in a person or culture's life. The list of capabilities has the capacity to apply to all human beings and not just one society in general, for each life has its own history and influences. It assesses the person as well as the human beings and their affiliation with other cultures. For example, Nussbaum mentions the story of women in Bangladesh, an area where women are less respected and expected to be less educated. The low-status women, however, still express satisfaction. How can this be? Their cultural forces have compelled them to not desire a higher ability of literacy or status in their society. Eventually, good-intentioned help imposed reading materials upon the woman without much explanation for why they should pursue a higher literacy rate. What eventually got the woman to want to improve their reading skills was an Aristotelian approach that entailed the justification for pursuing literacy. Once the women saw how education could positively impact their lives, they became more successful in their given industry and had better access to food and health. This story goes to show that the culture of a given people must first be understood before an advancement can be made. Another example in support of the list of capabilities can be found in any given city. In each urban area, there is an area that is designated wealthy and one of which is considered impoverished. Despite the state of the person's monetary wealth, they are all working towards a sense of happiness and continue to do so. The context, history, and culture of each society plays into the list of capabilities because it allows an understanding for various life types. It allows compassion and respect. As Nussbaum puts it, the list contains both limits against which we press and capabilities through which we aspire.
Looking back at Nussbaum's 10 capabilities, none of them can be directly tied to a country's gross domestic product. While the traditional model of measuring the status of a country was to measure how much money it had, it's now clear that this is not necessarily a reflection of its people's well-being. As it was mentioned before, even polling inhabitants of a country does not always reflect the population's welfare. When asked about their literacy, women from Bangladesh expressed contentment despite their poor literacy levels. In her publication, Nussbaum brings up that in order to understand whether or not a nation's people are flourishing, it is necessary to take into account the other 10 capabilities. The Human Development Index, or HDI, is one resource which does a better job at measuring the well-being of a nation's people. It takes into account a combination of a country's life expectancy, education, and gross national income, which is a measure of the standard of living, in order to come up with a more complete picture. In an ideal world, an index like this would take into account all 10 of Nussbaum's human capabilities to measure eudaimonia. However, realistically, many of these are too difficult to compare across countries. Despite the fact that we cannot exactly measure eudaimonia in countries, the Aristotelian idea of essentialism has clearly played an important part in shaping our views of a country's well-being.